you for holding this hearing. I'm going to focus on India and go into a little further detail. The indictment in New York City has received a lot of attention, as it should, and it contains extraordinarily serious allegations. But it didn't occur in a vacuum. India has close diplomatic ties with the United States, which have grown in the last 10 years. But during this period, the human rights situation in India has deteriorated rapidly. And the worsening situation has been well documented in a series of reports. At the center of this deteriorating situation is the ultra-nationalist ideology of the ruling party, the BJP, which is often labeled political opposition, religious minorities, especially Muslims and Christians, as essentially anti-national or enemies of the state. And sometimes this has even included protesting Sikh farmers who have been labeled falsely as Sikh separatists. This repression, as we see, is now spilling over India's borders, but we shouldn't just focus on allegations of murder for hire in New York City. The Indian government is also increasingly intimidating people by other means. Denials of consular services here in the U.S. to Indians in the U.S. on visas, cancellations of overseas citizenship of India cards, OCI cards, which Indian Americans have to ease their travel in India, refusing to allow Indian diaspora to enter the country. The ruling BJP party is also increasingly using an online troll army to harass and intimidate critics and journalists overseas, including right here in the U.S. And I want to highlight the case of Sabrina Siddiqui of the Wall Street Journal. Provides a very explicit example. Last summer, during a White House press conference during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington, Siddiqui asked Prime Minister Modi a question about India's deteriorating human rights record. Within hours, she'd come under withering attack from various senior officials in the BJP party, including the head of the BJP's so-called IT cell back in India, which has a record of leading these mass trolling attacks. And a wave of online attacks followed, which had the hallmarks of orchestration by the BJP's IT cell. It included threats, including to kill her, to rape her, to kill her 13-month-old baby, among others. And at the height of this attack, tweets about Sabrina were being posted on X at the rate of 1 per second. This orchestration constituted conduct which is already criminalized under the federal stalking statute. Siddiqui canceled plans to travel to India later during the G20, during Joe Biden's trip there, due to concerns about security raised by this incident. Now, these are apparent actions by the Indian government against a U.S. citizen in the United States. But other citizens of Indian origin have faced online attacks and other Indians in America. I have spoken to a lot of both Indian Americans and Indians on visas in the United States and others of South Asian heritage who have spoken of feeling physically unsafe in the United States from these sorts of campaigns, even here in Washington or in New York, 7,000 miles from Delhi. Americans of Indian origin have told me they've changed their behavior. They've kept a lower profile. They've refrained from posting even innocuous comments about India. That's the impact on the victims. I just want to end by talking about the larger effects of transnational repression like this, not just on freedom of expression generally, which harms all of us, but on the foreign policy capacity of the United States. The transnational repression leads to self-censorship. People can't continue their work. As a result, intended research doesn't happen. Those who wish to report on incidents of abuse here in the United States become justifiably afraid to report them. And this impacts U.S. government interests in promoting human rights abroad. In the case of India, because of this type of repression, information and debate about India's human rights record, it's stifled. And statements and letters of concern go unwritten by congressional offices. Congressional hearings do not happen. Legislation is not introduced. Proper reviews of military sales, such as the recent notification for the sale of Reaper drones to India, do not occur. So in other words, transnational repression harms the ability of the United States and other democratic governments to obtain and craft human rights-oriented policy towards other countries.